completely or not driven by that timeline there, because that is already in the works. It's a parallel process here. Now, certainly if there's something that gets identified and there's, maybe ample opportunity to provide that feedback, maybe it will have potentially an impact, but I don't see it that we are focused just on that. It's really just an opportunity for us to evaluate these programs, events that take place, and just to see where we are perhaps identifying some areas where the revenues that come from them and then looking at the costs could potentially mean rethinking how we do that. So those are my just opening remarks here. And what first, and we'll get into is first is just the approval of the minutes for the October 7th meeting. So is there a motion for approval of the minutes? And I am looking at my phone, so it's hard to just see everyone. I can only see like one.
Approve.
So okay, thank you, Lauren. So motion to approve by Lauren. Is there a second? Seconded by Deborah. Any comments on the minutes? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, the minutes are approved. All right, moving on then. We're good. Yes. Was there a comment?
So just a thank you.
Oh, sure. All right. So moving on to the next part of the agenda is the review of programs and related information offered by the Economic Development Committee, and there is an attachment on the agenda there. So would that be Julian or Lauren? They'll be introducing the items here and speaking to what we have here.
Julian?
Sure, I can start it off. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I provided a very high-level conservative estimate based off some initial meetings I had with Chair Edens a couple of weeks ago. When we were on our first meeting of this committee earlier this month, Chair Edens had mentioned some figures based off that meeting we had held, and this is just a summary of those figures that she had referenced. I tried to clean it up a little bit just to make it easier to use in this discussion. As she had mentioned, I'm sure she can chime in, most of our programs that the Economic Development Committee has launched over the last several years are relatively inexpensive. From the Snowman Search, the Passport Program, each of those, our only involvement is very minimal, and it's similar to that each individual participating business spends to participate in the program. We had in 2020 planned to hold a lawn and garden summit. We had in 2020 planned to hold an April tax swap and sale, neither of which had happened. But we had put down some rough estimates of how much in expected revenue we would expect to spend for those events if they had not been canceled for 2020. And then regarding Winterfest, just a general disclaimer, Chair Edens and I had put these figures together without much, if any, conversation with the Department of Planning, just based off some of the initial costs that we knew were involved in that event. As you can tell, they're very estimate, very round off, and all are the same cost. So that there was not too much research that went into these other than just knowing general dollars of how much was spent on each item. The reason I bring that up is that the second agenda item tonight from the Planning and Parks Committee also identifies additional costs for the Winterfest that were not included in that presentation by our committee. So those numbers are provided just for discussion, but there's also other additional costs that were identified by the Department of Planning that are not shown on this report. It includes costs for the electric, cost for the contractor to set up the tent and tear down the tent, which are substantially more expensive than those that I identified in our introductory memo. But I just wanted to note that for the committee. But these costs are just for our discussion to represent generally what the committee, what the Economic Development Committee has done as far as programming, what costs there are that are included in those initial events and programs the committee has been involved with. Lauren, I'd be happy to let you chime in.
Sure, and just as I referenced last time, when we did, for example, the summer tour passport program.
Hey, Lauren, can I pause for a second, Lauren? I don't know if it's just me or is the volume affecting anyone or?
No, yeah, I can't hear very well.
Okay,
Okay.
so is this better or?
It is better. Yeah. Yeah. Unless
Okay.
maybe your microphone is blocked or something. It just,
This laptop, I think it's on its last leg. Bless its little sweet overheated heart. I briefly referenced last time, but both the summer tour passport program and the snowman search are paid for by themselves. So when we had that nice passport printed, it was paid for by the fees that we collected from the participating businesses. So we just entered as if we were a participant ourselves at the same rate that we charge for our businesses. So that's why it said there was a registration cost, which was again the flat rate that we charged across the board, and then the cost to order a stamp. So we have done some successful, cost neutral programs. Really, we've just looked at putting additional ideas that we've had as a committee on hold. Although when we talked about some of those ideas, we did talk about finding a way to make them revenue generating. Now, whether or not it would be neutral would be something different, as it was in the early stages of planning. So there's not a lot we've had to work with, and there's not a lot we really have to cut on this. So I believe the tax swap and sale was going to, the organizer of that was probably going to charge an entry fee, and that entry fee I think was going back to equine assisted therapy, if I remember right. But like we said, it didn't end up happening. So
For the Winterfest event that I identified on my memo, even though I noted a total cost of about $2,500, I would instead use the figure provided by Planning and Parks Committee for the figure that was closer to 4,400, because that included all of the hard costs that planning had spent on last year's event, which just were not included in our memo.
okay. So we'll disregard that piece from looking at it here.
Correct.
And then, okay.
and really, other than what we mentioned last time, the biggest chance to save costs for repeat events is having, permanent installations of electric or a stage at something like the Village Green, where we would be saving in repeat costs over the years. And that would certainly be true for some of the electrical costs with Winterfest, but we're also trying to, light up trees and run additional electric. So I'm not sure how much that would decrease for that particular event.
Well, if you held it on the plaza, would it be less cumbersome and impact the fees for electricity, or no?
Joe, would you like to?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Edens. Ms. McCutcheon, principally the cost of the electric was to heat the large tent. Given the time of year, there was a feeling, at least amongst the Department of Planning and I think other city team members, that we needed a heated tent so people could get inside if it was really cold. They could eat in there. We had tables set up, and then just for the kids themselves to warm up after being out for a while. So that required a generator, also required laying out the electrical lines and then making the hookups inside so it could be lighted. Other than that, we use the electric that's available in the public plaza for the tree itself. And then the trees that we lit around the public plaza area, all the GFIs, they're at the base of the tree as part of the grate. They all worked, so we got off somewhat easy there.
So it would cost us more if we had it on the Village Green. Is that correct?
Well, I think as part of our input processes relative to Village Green, we've got to make sure that if we, as Ms. Eden stated, end up using that for many of our events, we should make sure we have ample electric at key locations throughout it.
Yeah.
Oh, and then one other thing I wanted to add is before we had talked about what it would look like to work with the WBA to do another version of the barbecue bash. And the proposal that we saw at the previous ad hoc committee for that appeared to be well thought out. and revenue generating that would go back to the city. So I would still be interested in a post-COVID world with working with the WBA in economic development and planning and parks to try that model out and see if we would have enough profit go back for some of these other non-generating events that don't have the potential to be if we want to have consistent participation. We could look at trying some of what the WBA suggested at a different event. So selling wristbands for food and drink. I don't know how that works when you have additional competitive vendors, but it's certainly ideas that are worth trying to use maybe for more than one event.
And the WBA itself is a nonprofit, so they cannot legally collect profit from any of these events. So their intent was, by partnering with the city on a potential barbecue event or craft beer event, would be to use any proceeds from that were not returned back to the city to go towards Winterfest, to buy a better tree, to put towards the cost of the event. So in a way, any cost that the city might incur towards Winterfest could be recouped from the WBA, potentially.
Well, can I back up for a second? If we have events at the village green that requires electricity and so forth, would we not have to purchase some kind of equipment to make that happen?
Actually, depending on the types and number of structures that ultimately get included in the concept plan or master plan, all of those will have electrical service to them. And if we do it right, like we did in Community Park, we'll build an electrical network that'll accommodate the largest band to the smallest activity. And for the most part, I think we'll be able to run our own extension cords, let's say, from the hub of the electrical network, and not need to lease generators, have individuals out there laying lines, doing all the things that generate that cost of over $2,000.
Thank you.
Repeated labor costs for setup and takedown would be saved. So that's kind of all, I think, all Julian and I have.
What is there a possibility? So we are partnering with the Wildwood Business Association for Winterfest?
Not this year. No, this year, any consideration of Winterfest as it were in 2019 will not be happening. At our last committee meeting last week, the committee decided that because of COVID regulations and restrictions, that there is just no feasible way that we or the WBA can manage crowd control. There were concerns from the WBA about holding a Halloween event earlier this month that with county involvement, just there was no way to hold the event as they had intended. So with that instruction from the county, knowing how Winterfest was held in the past, there was just no feasible way to hold that type of an event again this year. So instead, the committee shifted its potential focus to be more of a self-guided, self-driven, decorate town center, let people drive through Plaza Drive on their own time and have the tree lit, maybe have a radio station play carolers so that they can have their own winter wonderland experience without needing to have a full crowd of 1,000 people gathering in a public plaza at one time.
So these aren't planned events, these are past events.
Correct.
And adapted, so Lawn and Garden Summit will be rescheduled.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
With the chair's permission, Ms. McCutcheon, I think this is the slate of events that the Economic Development Committee, per Chair Edens and Mr. Jacquin, would like to promote in 2021.
So on the Lawn and Garden Summit, is there possibility of charging some sort of fees for those who participate so that we may be zero neutral or even close to it?
We had discussed that. We did not recommend it for the first year for participants. One of the things that we were trying to do was to feature our local businesses. So as opposed to hiring someone that would charge a lecture fee, they were offering to show off their degrees and knowledge and expertise with providing free lectures, and then rather than paying the city to participate and feature them, they were offering attendees discounts to make future customers out of attendees. So we looked at, I think it was 19 or 18 partner organizations in addition to the 5 businesses that were featured. Most are nonprofits. I think a couple might actually be not-for-profit. So we discussed this. I'm not sure, you know, in COVID, how much extra revenue these nonprofits have to participate and to pay a vendor fee. I think since it was really such a low cost, it's probably not worth picking on this one too much, just because this was sort of going to be the trial year. So we wanted to see what participation looked like. Is this something people want to see annually, every couple of years? I think if we had it off the ground and it was a continual event where we could guarantee participation, it would probably be easier to charge a fee, but.
And to Miss Eden's point, the intent was to hold this first Lawn and Garden Summit this year to kind of kick it off, see what the response was like. Each of the 8 participating Wildwood business owners were giving lectures on the topic of their choice based off their specialty. I think when our planning committee was meeting, the group never believed that scope of an event would happen every year. I think the idea was that the summit would be the kickoff, and then maybe every 3 or 5 years we'd come back and do it again. But in the off years, we'd rotate it around to the business owners to do little breakout summits instead. So Zick would hold one, FIC would hold one, Pasiglia's would hold one. So every 3 years we can come back and do it again. So even though, like we show, just estimate based off what we intended to spend this year, that might be an every 4 years or every 5 years cost, not an every year cost.
Mm-hmm. And we did have a couple hundred pre-register, which is why we knew we would not make the county guidelines during COVID. And
so those that are registered, are they
just folks like yourself that its registration wasn't required, that just said up front that they would be attending and that these were the lectures that they were most interested in coming to?
So is it all lectures?
No. Do we? I don't know if we still have that archived, but we produced a schedule, and there were many topics, MINI topics that were repeated, I believe twice on the schedule. And so you could either hang out outside at the large tent and look at the vendors, or you could actually go inside to City Hall and hear a lecture, for example, about removing invasive honeysuckle. You could see Rick worked on getting a stream table, so the erosion task force was going to have a booth. The Science Center was going to participate. We had beekeepers and goats on the go, and so there was a way to spend time outside, look at other partner organizations, learn about maybe joining a group like Master Gardeners. And then if you were interested and you can see the presenters and topics on this list, then you would go inside, follow the schedule, and see a demonstration. Like, for example, pruning was going to be something that there would be a demonstration of by Pasiglia. So it was both indoor and outdoor. You were free to roam, or you were free to attend every lecture you wanted. And that was kind of the plan.
Well, my suggestion would be maybe to charge a basic fee for people to attend any lecture that they want to attend, so that we cut some of the city's cost out. Or I saw refreshments on there, maybe charge for refreshments versus the city paying for them.
We were both, sorry, you're good, go ahead.
That's okay. So the refreshments were really for the businesses giving the presentations and volunteers for setup.
We were offering both a food truck and a drink tent outside that people could buy at cost to pick up drinks and hot chocolate and pick up food from a food truck at their own cost. So we were not paying for either of those.
Look, can I ask a question? Looking at the what you just not what you had on the screen, but what's included in the agenda. So the Lawn and Garden Summit, the total cost is $1,200. Does that include then what the vendors or the presenters? It is. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just provide my opinion. I don't think right now that that's going to save much at this point, and especially to try to get it off the ground. I think the investment of it is good seed money to try to get it going. But I do think that, as the event grows and perhaps then when costs increase, then maybe that needs to be revisited to see how we could do that, make it
Mhm.
closer to being cost neutral there.
Yeah.
Mr. Vunich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the Program Budget Committee, I'm not trying to be a martyr or saint, but I think the Wildwood Garden Summit should stand alone, so to speak, and be able to use the money it needs to get it off the ground without having the issue of charging a fee. And if the $1,200 is an issue, I think the next memorandum, we could certainly find it there.
I
And,
think so. Yeah.
and I would offer that as an option. I
It's
think
not, my point is not so much the cost, but the way I understand it, the task of this committee is to see where we could cut costs or where we could be budget neutral on these events. And so that's the way I was looking at them. And I looked at them by the cost that the city had to put in out of the city's general fund, and then the number of people that have participated in that event. And then what within each one of those events could we eliminate that's not necessary for the city to pay for. So that's the way I was looking at them, not necessarily by the event title or exactly what the event was, but I thought our task was to cut down the budget.
Well, you are right on that point, but I do, where I guess I'll add in a different perspective is that not every event will we have the option or the opportunity to be able to make it cost neutral. Think of, for example, a concert. That is an open area where people coming walking in. You can't restrict the entry, and then the cost just involved in trying to collect and the impact it would have to attendance in a situation like that. And then also because it's so recognized with Wildwood, there are probably just some events where we are probably going to just have to accept that it doesn't make sense for it to be an event where we collect any kind of revenue from let's say a participant. Now there might be some different considerations with vendors, but I think we're going to have to look at it, but not, I don't think it's possible that every event will be that way. There may be some events, and I think there's more discussion on this on the next one that we see there, where we can look at that. And I think we already are taking some steps in, collecting revenues. So maybe that's the question we have to look at is that enough? Is it justifiable? Does the attendance make sense? Things like that.
Well, I agree. I'm not saying we should charge an entry fee for every event, but I think out of some of the events, there are some things that we can decrease or do without, which would lower the cost of the event, but would not be charging residents to attend.
Oh, well, the residents would be charged to attend if they paid the fee to attend the class.
I'm
so.
not just talking about lawn and garden summit. I'm just in general.
Yeah, I do think maybe we need to readdress the goal. Is the goal to make every single event budget neutral, or is it to try to get the total that we spend on all events budget neutral? I think it should be more of a bigger picture total.
Yeah, I mean, I do not expect that we are going to make changes to every single event. I think we are looking for those opportunities where it makes best sense. And like with the example of Lawn and Garden Summit, I can justify, this is an event that has not occurred yet. We do not know how it will execute. We have what we project what it would be like. But I think if we want this event to be successful, and looking at the low cost that there is here, I don't, that's really a small amount of, the overall city budget there. So, that's where I think there might be some more discussion maybe in some of the bigger events. So, Mr. Cross, you're on mute. You're still talking on. All right, there you go.
Sorry, not quick enough on the draw there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to respond to Ms. Edens with regards to what I believe the charge of this committee is to look at each event and where feasible, try to make it budget neutral or eliminate some costs. I don't think even in overall, if we look at all our events and put them in a bucket to try to come up at a budget neutral position, I don't think that's the charge either. I think we just go through the list of items, see where it makes sense to charge a fee. In other cases, as Mr. Garitano just pointed out, it doesn't make sense at all. So there's still going to be a cost to the city. It's a cost of doing business. We want to try to keep that down and use partnerships where we can and so forth. But I don't think the goal is to try to make sure that we are revenue neutral on every single event or in total. I don't think that's the charge the mayor has given to this committee.
Yes, I would agree with you on that. Remember too, we already do collect revenue in this city through the form of taxes and other inputs into the budget. So residents do expect something to come back out of that. And therefore, there are going to be some events where, that's covered through the revenues we already collect. It's just trying to see where there are maybe some events where the cost, and maybe it's the cost per person, is so high that in that case, does it make sense that we start to collect some money there? Because maybe it doesn't affect the whole population or a good segment of the population, things like that. Maybe more of these niche type of events that occur. So, I mean, we're just getting into the details here, so I don't think we'll solve it all tonight.
Joe, I have a question. So when you say the residents are paying taxes, what taxes are you referring to?
So the city collects revenue about 30 to 40% from sales tax, the pool sales tax, and then the other revenues that we collect as well. There are certain fees. So we collect money. It does come from the residents. It just doesn't come directly like as if, someone's paying when they're entering an event or something like that. But
because we don't have municipal taxes.
No, but we collect sales tax. Our residents do pay sales tax. So it does.
And the utility tax.
And the utility. Yeah, that is true. Indirectly. Maybe that might be an easier way to phrase it.
One thing to think about, is that economic development's sort of twist on events is that we're actually supporting the tax generating businesses. So the way we feature things is different, and we're actually featuring the money makers for our city that feed back into us. So we're thinking about the cost and benefit. I think that's important to note.
All right. Well, thank you for going through this here. At this point right now, I don't have anything right now that I could suggest to change with what we've seen so far with economic development. We may come back to that at some point, but maybe this is just good to get the understanding and to digest the information. So unless there's any objection, I think we might want to move on to the next part of our agenda. Right, so moving on then to the next.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Okay. I'm somehow lost that. So the next part of the agenda is the review of programs and related information offered by the Department of Planning and Parks. And is that Mr. Vunich or Ms. Arnett or someone else that will introduce this one?
Well, unfortunately for all of you, it'll be me to start. And then with Kathy and Steve's assistance, hopefully we can get through most of this in the time allotted. Before I do start, I do want to thank Kathy, Gary, and Bree, who did the lion's share of the work pulling together all the numbers that are associated with the department's memorandum. It was something we needed to do for a long time, and it's not to say that we don't know each of the events and how much we spend and how much we take in. It's just I don't think we've ever put it on a single page or in a single memo to take a look at it. So it was a good exercise. And before I kind of go into the events, I just want to give you a little bit of background and explain how we got where we are today. So kind of go back in your mind to the time frame of roughly 1994 and through the early part of 1995. There was an incorporation effort underway in what was then unincorporated St. Louis County. And at that time, there was competing interests. Obviously, there were the incorporators wanting to gain control of the city and basically guide its destiny into the future. There were others in the community that saw it as a threat. Some, practically speaking, they thought it would never work financially. Others were concerned about what it meant for the development potential of their properties, and a whole litany of reasons on either side why one would support it or not. So when the city first incorporated back in September 1995, I wouldn't say that we had a cohesive community, a group of people, the entirety of the population that felt that Wildwood was either a good idea or a bad idea. We had a mixed bag, so to speak. And the charge that was given from our appointed city council and then eventually elected city councils early on was, how do you build community in a city like Wildwood, one that doesn't have 100 plus years of history, and most people move in and don't even think about how to get here, to a community that has suburban development, has rural development, has areas that have great internet, areas that have no internet, areas that are served by all utilities, areas that are on private streets, and their utilities are all in their lot. And so it's a really diverse community in many regards, both from the attitudes of the people, the places they live, and the experiences they have. And so we talked about a lot of things early on, and ultimately the thing that kept coming back, at least from the input I received from the appointed city council and elected city councils, was let's try doing some recreation events, get people together, give them an opportunity to meet each other, to basically talk about where they live, how many kids they have, what school they go to, et cetera, et cetera. And at that time, like with the Lawn and Garden Summit, the thought was if we immediately come out and start charging people, that's probably either going to give credence to those that said financially Wildwood wouldn't work, and more likely would just turn people off. The first experience with Wildwood is one where they're paying for something already. And so that's the path we started out on, to create events that generated a community feeling. And then also to make those events as, I guess, enjoyable as possible, which meant you could leave your wallet or your purse at home. And from that perspective, I think we've been very successful. And it's not that there isn't an expense to it, but I think Mr. Garitano, more so than many, who's attended, I think, almost every one of our concerts, can see that on a concert night, you do see our community here, and you see a group of people, I think, that really love what Wildwood does and what Wildwood's about. So from that perspective, that's why oftentimes when we get asked, well, why don't we charge for this? Or is there a fee for that? That's not how we started. And maybe our own success has created the problem. How do you change what you've been doing for years and all of a sudden ask people to pay for certain aspects of an event they're used to not paying for. And that'll be your all's charge, not mine. And we'll implement whatever you tell us to do ultimately. So with that, that's how we got here. So in terms of the memorandum, the events are in alphabetical order. So take it from that perspective. It's not how we start in January with the Arbor Day run. No, we don't. But they're in alphabetical order for the purposes of presentation. Generally speaking, this is all the events. So we've included the classes that are hosted by St. Louis Children's Hospital, the early childhood recreation programs that we hold through the fall and spring seasons, and our large events such as Celebrate Wildwood, the Art Festival, and the 3 concerts. As you can see, I asked for detail and I got detail. Just on the first event, the Arbor Day event, you can see that the health bars and water for the aid station was $233.71, down to the penny. And so I think that I don't want to necessarily go through each and every event. Certainly I can. Kathy and I can do that. But I guess I'd just like to summarize some of the main points. We do charge for certain events, particularly the runs and hikes. We try to be competitive in that regard. Some runs, some hikes, some other events of the similar nature across the region, they charge well in excess of $40 or $50 or $60 now. To me, they're generally associated with a charitable organization and they're trying to raise funds for good causes. We try, for the most part, to give a low-cost alternative to our residents and others, a place where they can come and have a first-class event and not necessarily have to think, can I afford to do this? Can I bring my wife and kids and participate? So that's part of the logic behind the runs and hikes. The larger events, we do charge our vendors fees for space at those events. For example, the crafters, the authors, the art festival participants, et cetera, et cetera. For example, the art festival participants ultimately pay $150 to the city for their space on Main Street or wherever the art festival has been held. And many of the vendors are charged anywhere from $25 to $50, depending on the size of their space. Some of those fees are low, and the low fees are intentional. The Wildwood Celebration Commission, which oversees 2 of the largest events the city hosts, have always wanted to, again, have more participants, not less participants. And the feeling was the best way to do that is to provide a reasonable price that the participant could feel with a certain level of certainty they could easily make that back plus much more. The other policy we have in place for some of our larger events relates to not-for-profits, other governmental agencies, and the like. We do not charge them. The feeling is they are already providing integral services to the city of Wildwood. They're part of our fabric, the safety net that exists for our residents. And so we want them there to basically promote themselves and also explain potentially things that our residents may not know they do. And so we've always tried to encourage them to be there by just, you can have a tent, you can have a table, 2 chairs, and we'll do our best to make you feel at home. So the larger events, the Wildwood Celebration, the Art Festival, you can see that what we do collect is well less than what the charge or the expenditures are in this regard. Wholly speaking, if you look at the Art Festival and the Celebrate Wildwood event, one being a loss, so to speak, to the city of approximately $41,000. And then the Celebrate Wildwood event, if I can find it here. Bear with me just one more second. at
It's about the
73.
same.
Yeah, that's $100,000+ event by the time we factor in the revenues and fees we collect and what we spend. So we do charge. We don't charge a significant amount. The responsibility to the department has always been to complete the event in a safe and secure and functional way. And the city council has yet to say that we need to increase those fees, which again is why we're here tonight. Besides that, the concerts, the back to school party, those things where we see our greatest attendance, we also charge no fees or collect any revenues. And again, that kind of gets back to what I started with, and just that those are our community events. Those are our bread and butter. That's what brings people to City Hall or to Town Center. And those are the things that I hear about still today. For example, I remember that concert you had at Babbler State Park, and we couldn't even sit for very long because of all the mosquitoes. But I didn't leave. I enjoyed the music, that kind of stuff. And it's like, those are memories we're creating. And we're creating them, I think, by what our city council allows city staff to do. So like I say, the back to school party, the board appreciation event, the business appreciation event, the cabin fever, those are all ones where we just, it's just our perspective, and this has been from city councils in the past. These are our bread and butter. Let's make them good, and let's make people feel like we care about you. Some of the items we do are kind of what I would consider those niche events that Mr. Garitano mentioned. The Centaur time trial, we spend $200, but we bring some of the best regional and Midwest cyclists to Wildwood to give them an opportunity to basically see portions of Wildwood, to see a positive experience in the city and the cooperation our department has with the police. Color-coded chef. This is a resident of Ward 5, Terry, and her son has special needs. And she came up with an idea about how to let him do recipes and cook by not necessarily measurements or numbers or this or that, but with color. And we've offered it on a couple of occasions, and it's been wildly successful because people have brought their children and they learn a skill. They understand that they can do things that they didn't think they could do. And so it's just really positive. Early childhood recreation programming, as you can see, on average, it goes from anywhere from about $700 to $800 for most of the programs. And that's 100 children we serve in the age groups 2 to 5. This is usually done by Bree and Gary. It's a labor-intensive service we do provide to our residents. For all intents and purposes, Kathy can attest, she's watched kids grow up from when she used to manage the program to now they're in high school and college, and talk to her at the concerts. And it's kind of funny to watch them all grow up in front of you. We've added some events like the new resident picnic and the plein air event, because again, there was a desire to, again, reach out to our residents, particularly new residents, and create that community. And then also with regards to the plein air event, there's always been a desire to basically associate Wildwood with the art. And we do that through our sculptures that we have around City Hall. We do it with the art we display at City Hall and the encouragement we give to the community college, and our two major events, the Art Festival and the plein air event. If you want to see what I think is a successful event, go to the atrium here at City Hall and look at the art and photography from this past event in September. The artists and photographers take a perspective of the city that, you know, someone like me, a lay person with no eye, can't see. And it's just neat to see how they see Wildwood. They are for sale. And so there's just a great opportunity for residents to basically take part of Wildwood home. We have events for seniors. Most of those events are covered by community development block grant funds. We do our traditional spring egg hunt, which is always fun, the fastest 30 seconds in the world. And then just some other virtual events that we've added because of COVID-19. All in all, I think it's a well-rounded schedule. We see a lot of familiar faces, but it's not also unusual to see new people. And then they become usual faces at our events. And I think I just would like to conclude, the grand total of all of this is about $300,000. It's a great deal of money, and there's a lot of responsibility that goes with that amount of funding. But I guess I would just draw your attention to three things. If you eliminate the Celebrate Wildwood event, if you eliminate the art festival, and if you eliminate the 3 concerts, that amount drops down to about $110,000. And so from that perspective, minus those 5 events, everything else we do is about 1% of the overall budget of the city of Wildwood. And I think when I look at it, and maybe I'm a little prejudiced toward it, I think that's some of the best money we spend. Think of it as about 9 concrete slabs. People like to drive on smooth roads, but I don't think they appreciate the fact as much as they do being able to get together as community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich, for very good presentation here. And I think these numbers that you've put together and everyone that helped put together, this is truly good information. And I'm glad that you put this in a way relative to the overall big picture here. So, I think, and definitely my perspective, I could be wrong. I don't think anyone's going to be looking to cut events or anything like that. I think the ask, as we've been charged with, is really just where we have those opportunities out there that, we could be more cost neutral. So this is very good because I got answers to questions that I was hoping I would get tonight, and I do think that we're not going to be able to solve it all anyway tonight, or at least come out with anything out of it. First, I think if there are any recommendations, I would love to hear from the experts, the people that do the work, right? You guys. So, you may have some thoughts already in your mind in the future. And it may not be just, where we try to make it revenue neutral, but maybe it's a way of, spending money differently. How we, if we get catering or something, does it, do we do food vouchers and have them get it instead of getting catered or something like that? Does that help bring costs down so that at least we do not hurt the event? But I do think a lot of these events here are part of the cost of being a city, and cities provide, like Joe said, infrastructure, concrete, but they also provide programming. And that's what makes a city what it is. So your example was great to highlight that. I mean, we may have a cost. The revenue may not be dollar signs, but it may be community that we get, just like you said, Joe. So we have to look at that. And certainly as we look and consider things, the feasibility, there's just some events or things where feasibility, you just can't implement some kind of revenue or anything like that. And, not only from just the way you implement it, but we don't want to negatively impact attendance, because there are some events probably that are just do really good because they are free events. But once you start to put, a cost to it, the attendance drops off. And we don't want to hurt events like that or even look at that. We definitely, I think, want to make sure we're aligned with how other comparable events in the community are. It sounds like you're doing that already. So we want to make sure from the revenue perspective, for those events like races and things like that, that we're in we're comparable and we're not being unrealistic. And as well, how we spend money so that we're comparable in, what other cities do so that it's reasonable. And, I think the information here is good. Probably one thing I was looking at was really coming down to what is the cost, what it comes down to cost per person. And it could be calculated here because you look at what an event costs and you look at the attendance, and you could see where there are those events that have, um, a low cost. So, for example, you've got Celebrate Wildwood. The cost per person, I think I figured out, with just 5,000, and that's just the bottom end of the range. Bottom end of the range. That's $18 a person. What it comes down to, and that's probably $18 well spent. We're getting a lot for our $18 a person on an event like that. That's a steal. And then there are probably events where we do look at the cost per person, and maybe that's where we look at if there's a high cost. We just have to look a little bit closer and say, is there something we could do differently? Is there something that we can way to bring it down? So, all right. Again, I don't think we'll be able to solve it all, and we have to be conscious of. There's, I think, erosion task force tonight. What time is that? 6:30. We want to make sure that you all get a chance to get a break, maybe even get some dinner or something.
And
So,
Mr. Chair, with your permission, Kathy and I will not come empty-handed to this group. Kathy, more so than I, has a keener eye toward what I think is what we think is successful and what we think is not. And so at a future meeting, and it could be as soon as our next meeting, we'll have some suggestions, at least in terms of some of the events we think we either could eliminate or significantly change so as they become more low expenditure or closer to revenue neutral. So I didn't think it was appropriate to bring those forward tonight, but certainly I think, and I don't want to speak for Kathy, I think we can do that if you like to provide them.
maybe that's the thing, rather than trying to solve that, which we don't have the time to solve it tonight. Like, I kind of shared where I am, where my point of view is. Here are our points of view, and maybe kind of think about what you could do with that. So from my perspective, I don't want to see an event cut, but if there's an event where it's like, we've tried this for a few years, it's low attendance, it's just not getting off the ground, we can probably take that money and put it into another event that might have a better, success. Then maybe that's an opportunity. Maybe that's something to do. So there's an opportunity there. But the points that I said is really looking at the feasibility of the event. If there is a revenue process already in place, is it aligned, or does it need to be adjusted? I think that cost per person, when you look at it, especially events where you have tremendous turnout and that cost is low, that means we're probably doing a good job. We've lowered that cost down per person. It's like airline seat miles, you want to get that down. So, the ones that have a high cost, there might be still, a really good, strong reason, that we continue to do it, or that's where we evaluate it. But I think those are some of the things, at least if that's going to give you some thoughts or ideas and look into it, and then, come back and then we can hear what you've got. So Miss Edens, Councilmember Edens, you had your hand up.
Yes, we're not just talking about numbers, we're talking about qualitative and quantitative data, and it's hard to put a number on experiences. And one thing that I think that the staff has done, well, there's lots of things you've done a really good job on, but one thing I appreciate is the varying locale of these events, right? When you talked about building community, one of the things that you've done a really good job of, right, is the bike trial is not the same, place as the Arbor Day run, which is not the same place as a half marathon or 7K rather. I mean, or the cabin fever hike. So you're actually getting people to experience different parts of Wildwood that they wouldn't others see. So when you come back with your recommendations, I would ask you to keep that benefit in mind. I think it's important to kind of make sure everything just isn't at City Hall. And it's also a representation of the values of this community. I have gone to summer concert series in Fast Park before, but I can tell you that Chesterfield doesn't replicate what we do at Plain Air, and they don't replicate the same types of hikes. They just don't have it to offer it. So it's part of our value system of being green and being a healthy community. So I think that's worth keeping in mind. I don't see that there's a great way to charge for the back to school party or the summer concert series. The other thing I would ask for to come in, if you find something where you say, I want to charge a user fee, my next question would be to consider whether or not it's always something that you want to be a flat rate, or do you want kids under 12 for free? Do we want a senior citizen discount? Do we want veterans for a discount or free? If we do that, we probably should keep it as consistent across all events and how we stair step or keep a flat rate. The only other thing that I saw is I don't know. See, the problem is it takes more staff time. If there's a way to cut catering costs for some of the events, so it was more of picking up pre-prepared food from Costco or Sam's, if that comes in nickels and dimes, a couple $1,000s here and there, but that requires time to pick it up. But that's other than really trying out something revenue generating like the barbecue bash and the WBA. I would just be interested to hear your recommendations next week. But like I said, I value the wide variety of what you've done. I value the different physical locations. I can tell you that there's events that I truly believe that if we charged for, that the people wouldn't come to. One thing is, I can tell you I love my Arbor Day sweatshirt. I wear it all the time. I can also tell you it kind of becomes a running joke, especially with high schoolers and college kids and on up, that you get a t-shirt for every event and then you have too many t-shirts. So it's possible that participants maybe don't want free t-shirts anymore, or are willing to pay $5 and pre-order something. And you might find that for something at the low cost of $5, only 10 people commit to pre-ordering, and that would tell you the first time around that people maybe don't need an extra t-shirt. Problem is, it's also a great way to advertise for your city, right? Because you're a walking logo for the event. But I can tell you, I got very sick of extra t-shirts. But like I said, I wear my Arbor Day sweatshirt that I probably came in last for with my dad. So maybe it's more about the type of clothing. And then my other question is, when we have something like the scrapbooking event, are we only serving maybe the same group of people? So it's the same group of regulars, because maybe we already created that sense of community, and maybe we now essentially created a social club, like a continuing book club or something like that. Maybe what we do is, if it's the same group of people and we're not getting new people, we just to continue to provide a space and say, would you like to bring a packed lunch? Maybe that community benefit has already been there. So I would be interested in knowing, is it always the same kids that are in every early childhood event? Is it always the same scrapbookers? But otherwise, I've talked plenty, and I really appreciate what we have to offer as a city.
I'll add one thing that maybe Joe and Kathy and Steve, you guys can think about too, is that we want to make sure we are doing events. And I think the number one audience or population we want to make sure that's enjoying it are our Wildwood residents, right? And so the reason I say that is that sometimes I've seen where you go to other cities and a non-resident does not get a discount. So the residents are getting a discount, or the residents are free, non-residents pay. And so that might be a way of looking at things too, because that's where, and again, I don't have the data. I do not know. You can pull up, race registrants and things like that. But that would be interesting data to see. we put this money, let's say, all into a race. We're buying the sweatshirts. What's the percentage of Wildwood resident versus non-Wildwood resident? And that might be a question we think about. Just look at, explore and say, is it worth the couple $1,000, but it's really going out of the city? Because if it's in the city, I think that's fair. That's fair. But it'd be interesting, because I could see that if there are some cities that like I do not take advantage of the swimming pool at one of the cities right nearby, but the discount, the pass that we offer. But if I go there, I believe I recall, because I'm not a resident, I pay a different rate to use it for the day. And so that might be a model we need to think about too, a little bit more.
Whatever. I don't know if I'm muted or not. I was gonna say, whatever, Kathy, whatever rate you charge, just make sure you build in a senior citizen discount, okay?
It's true. I think we should have that too.
I've got one more thing.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Okay, not that you need any more on your plates, but I know in the past, and we talked about, the 25th anniversary logo and what merchandising would look like. Have we thought about other types of merchandising that we would sell at events that could generate a profit? So for example, I have always enjoyed going to Main Street St. Charles for their Christmas celebrations, for Halloween. I found a really great Christmas ornament done by a local artist that had Main Street St. Charles on it. I bought it. I sent it out of state to a friend that visited with me. That is the type of thing that if it was different, I would buy every year from Wildwood and put on a tree. I don't know if there's things like that are different that maybe normal t-shirts, that we could do, a memento that the city would sell, that would be, again, cost generating for the art festival. I know we've done posters before, but maybe something different. That might be something to look into. Or even, if we ever produce something that was just really good, you might find that some local businesses would sell it as well.
I did buy my Wildwood note cards today.
And I didn't even know we had note cards. So.
You paid $20, right, Joe? Kathy?
Steve, you're overcharging.
That was tip.
Remember, well, Joe, what you don't know is that I set a goal for Bree at $125,000 that she needs to make on those cards. So yes, we're going to overcharge certain people.
I see. Well, I'm very impressed. I put the order in, and the email shortly thereafter said they were already shipped. So you have good turnaround over there.
We're efficient, and we are making a profit, but at Steve's bar that he set, we have to sell about 85,000 sets of note cards. So we're on it. We're going.
That's good. Deborah, you're being quiet. You got any thoughts? I'm sure you're thinking of something.
I've just been listening. I mean, I agree with a lot of things that you say. Community is important. Building a sense of community is important. But we also have to look at the times that we're living in right now financially. So I think there are things that we need to look at and maybe do a little bit differently, maybe cut back on some of the perks a little bit. I agree, when you first do a new event, the lesser the cost, the better. The better it builds that event, and the better it builds a sense of community, whatever that community may be, not necessarily just Wildwood residents. And I do like the idea of charging non-residents some sorts of fee, but then that's going to get really complicated. It's going to be hard to determine who's a resident, who's not a resident.
And that may be like those types of events where there's a registration in advance or something, because we collect that data. I don't anticipate that, we're going to have Kathy standing on Main Street when a concert's like, where are you from?
can run her down. Shake him down. We
You
actually
picked
already
the
do
right
that.
person, though.
Yeah. If anybody was going to shake them down, it would be me. We do already charge for some non-resident resident rates. So there are certain programs we have to verify residency, like the dog park memberships. So we do that in Rec Desk already. It gets a little complicated because we have zip codes that overlap municipal boundaries, but we pretty much have it down to a science. In fact, our senior programs are free to residents. They're $5 a piece to non-residents. So we are, I think that's a fairly easy thing that we can implement.
And I think you could do that with like the pavilion and other things that the city rents. We certainly could do a non-resident fee.
We do have a non-resident fee for pavilions.
And if you look at the other rentals for other cities, I think we're a little bit less expensive than some other cities are. So maybe we might think about, bumping up the rental cost just a bit.
We could. And if I could add just my 2 cents on a little bit of it. We're very cognizant of the shortfall that the city has in the city's budget, and we're very conscious of the responsibility we have in how we spend taxpayers' dollars. But the times that we are in also mean our residents are in that time too. And so increasing costs to them may also be maybe inappropriate or taken as difficult as it is for us to try and save $1 million and find $1 million in shortfall. It may be just as difficult for our residents to make up that difference. So I think we're trying to find that balance. And I think that's what this committee, you all are charged with, that difficult task. The one thing I will say that in 20 plus years of doing Parks and Rec, specifically in Wildwood, some people, that is their only interaction with the city. And we strive very hard to always make it a positive one. Because if you think, how many times have you picked up your phone to call City Hall to say positive things, or to call because things are great and say, thanks for spending my tax dollars today? It doesn't happen. So if someone is calling City Hall or is interacting with City Hall, they are, not that it's always negative, but it can be. It's a neighbor complaint. It's a trash problem. It's a zoning concern. It's, whatever. But the parks is generally a happy place. And so that's why I love that part of the department. It is the happy place to be. Zoning, not so much. So providing all of these events and just increasing that level of interaction with the city with as many people as we possibly can, I think is a huge benefit for our residents. Thank you.
And on that note, I think you brought up a good point. You're right. If there is interaction, it probably is through our events, our parks and stuff like that. So we want that to be a positive one. So then kind of flipping it around, the other types of interactions. Steve, did we say we were going to also look at it in this committee, the kind of the fees that, we haven't looked at in years?
Yes, we did. Given what was on the agenda, I didn't think it would be appropriate tonight to do that. We're more at the 35,000 foot level. But yes, we do have a schedule of fees that at some point in time, it would be appropriate for this committee to take a look at. But I think we've got a little more heavy lifting to do before we get down into the weeds like that. At least that'd be my opinion anyway, sir.
Yeah. Well, I think there'll be some prime opportunities there, because right off the bat, we know that hasn't been looked at in years. So that might be it. Well, I'm looking at the clock here. It gives you about 15 minutes before the next meeting. And I think right now we've got enough direction for, Joe and Kathy, just to kind of go back and look at what you've put together and come back with just some thoughts and recommendations that we can talk the next time. And that's, I think, really the next major deliverable. And then after that, we'll probably follow up with Steve with more of those fees. Is there anything else that I'm missing at this point?
Mr. Chair, do you want me to have those fees and have that on the next meeting agenda?
Well, I think we might want to focus on the next one still, just on I don't know. It depends on, I guess, what Joe and Kathy have.
Well, I think theirs is far more important at this early stage of the committee. So maybe I'll just hold off on that with your permission.
I think so, unless there's any objection from the committee here. All right. Well, I think we're good there. So Joe and Kathy, you got what we're looking for there, and we'll look forward to another good discussion. So
Thank you.
back on the agenda, Other than that, other items, I mean, I don't have anything else. So we covered that. So anything else from Ms.
I
McCutcheon?
forgot to put the next meeting date, which we don't have, but we probably need to discuss.
So, yeah, and if you want to just propose a date based on what the calendar at the city looks like and send an email, then we can respond back. All right. Well, I think this was a good discussion. Very good information pulling it together. Thank the folks that helped out with that. I know you mentioned Gary and Bree for that. And, I'm happy with so far where we are with this. And we'll keep looking to see how we can make any kind of adjustments that the committee agrees with. Mr. Cross.
I just wanted to make one statement that Mr. Vunich's impassioned speech of earlier makes you proud to live in the city of Wildwood.
Yeah, I know. We got lucky tonight. We had a good speech, Joe. That was.
I recorded it too. We're going to play it back.
That's good.
If it's off YouTube, you'll know why. I got to it.
Good. All right. Well, I guess that's it. Is there a motion to adjourn? Made by Councilmember Eden, seconded by Councilmember McCutcheon. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you all
Stay
again.
on this link for watershed, or do I need to get off and get off?
Different code. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
We have like standing links now for all the committees. So this will be the same link for every program budget committee meeting.
Oh, wow. Good job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
Well,
See you.
we were confusing ourselves. So we'll see you on the watershed link in a little bit.
Yeah, in about 10 minutes. See you in a bit.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Like a family reunion every other.